PhD thesis. Now, a PhD thesis is 3 years full-time work. So that's the size of that. And that's the size of Rod's first volume. And that's the size of Rod's second volume.
Is that making him a professor?
Well, I'll come to that. So that's the two, and don't forget there's a third one to come. The other thing that's different between what Rod's done and a PhD thesis is a PhD thesis not really written necessarily to entertain and have people gripped on every page. In fact, some PhD theses are written with quite the opposite intent. However, a PhD thesis, typically a page looks like that. So this thing is only on one side, all right? So it's half the size of Rod's work. Secondly, there's been no particular need to put in photographs, diagrams, or to put it in a format that is entertaining. So the amount of work just involved in formatting Rod's books and producing them for something that actually entertains as well as teaches is colossal. The difference is colossal. Now, bear in mind, this is someone's work for 3 full-time years. So what goes on behind Rod's book in order to get to the volume? Having said I'm in awe of it, pass over to you.
Thanks very much, Peter. And spoke to Kevin Hoffman at Lara, and when you speak to Kevin Hoffman at Lara, I know where he is in the room. I sat hours after hours, night after night, listening to these wonderful stories play here because the World Championships were on it. At that stage, all of the work for these 3 volumes had been done. And one of the last days, Lisa Cunningham came out to see the display, and she started to talk to me, and I told her that I'd done this work, and she said, "Well, where's it going?" And I said, "Well, it's not going anywhere because I need a decent editor." And she then put me on to her father, Ken Mansfield, and Ken Mansfield came out and said, "Well, where's it all going?" And I said, "Well, is Lisa here, Ken?" No, she's not. But then he put me on to his cousin, Neil Mansfield. Now, everything that has been said about me should be also said about Neil Mansfield. Neil Mansfield and I have worked. I don't know how Neil Mansfield can work with me, but he has, and he's never complained, and he keeps on sort of saying, "Well, when's the next chapter coming?" And that keeps me up right up to the mark. I want to give Neil Mansfield a bound copy of this. Neil Mansfield, would you mind coming out and I'm sorry, Neil, you don't like for this to happen, but it's going to happen whether you like it or not. I read bits and pieces that people have written about him over the years, and he must have been like Billy Guyatt. Really beautiful to see. Frank, you would know because you've seen him. So Harry would also have seen Saunders' race just after the war. So these are people behind the scenes who are important, and I'm sure that when Maury saw these little cards on the table here, trying to get an old cyclist association up, he would be really, really happy. Jeff, it's not all for nothing. It happens in the fullness of time. That's the way things are happening. This second volume is about the wars and the period in between the wars, and it flows on from the consolidation and development of cycling that took place in the before the First World War, and it's a time that happened just before motor cars came along. And I've just been doing some work on the 1950s, and because I see Kevin Hoffman here, I've just had a look at a picture, and Kevin Hoffman gave away cycling because he fell in love with this little car called a Volkswagen. Families today here who are here today, who are representing these families, and I'm going to list some of these names. The Mullen family is here today. You will read about the Mullen family. The Coots family. Bob McDonald. Now, Pat McDonald is here today. Pat's brother, Bob Jr., was a great tennis mate of mine. Little did I know that his father was a bike rider in the 1920s, and he kept a meticulous diary and scrapbook of details of his cycling. And those things like the diaries and the scrapbooks, and merely knowing Bob and knowing Pat and knowing the family really puts you in very close touch with the times. Bob then went on to do some rowing, as other cyclists do. But Bob McDonald's daughter is here today. We're really privileged to have her. The McLaughlin family, who were involved with Hazel Cycles. The Macaulay family is here today. The Macaulay family started off in Geelong West in 1911. They're a real dynasty with Kenneth MacDonald. Their family is here today with us. I'm going to ask Frank Conda to say a few words later, because Frank Conda appears on the second last chapter, the picture of Frank Conda. Before he goes away to war, he joins the Geelong West Club, but I'm going to get him to say a few words. Family who, when you look at the Phillips, the name Phillips in the 1920s and the Geelong Amateur Cycling Club, you'll realise how important he is. The Belproud family are here today. The Belproud family, that run from about 1911 through to the 1930s, magnificent family. They're represented today. The Heed and Eagles family are here today. We're really, really privileged to have these people around us. They were embedded, the Heed and the Eagles family, embedded. If I say those two names together, I run from the 1880s through to the 1980s. We actually have a family member of the Finlay family. Now, the Finlay family first appear riding velocipedes in Geelong. We had a fella, Galton, here, but Galton wasn't half the man that the Finlay man was. So I hope the Finlay family don't get too embarrassed by all this, but I'll serve it up to him anyhow. The Tate family is here from volume 3. We've got a person here today, Fred Cook, who is from the Queenscliff Rail Trail. These are the sort of developments that's taken place in the latter years when Kevin Hoffman's got sick of his cars and we're starting to ride bicycles along rail trails and things like that. We've got a member of the McPherson family, the Canny Scots they were called. They first appear from Purnham, winning an Austral wheel race, Dooley McPherson, in about 1905. We don't have any other Austral wheel races except for Tommy Sholito in 1945. We've got the Hamblett family here today. The Hamblett family with Frank Conda and others, Jack Dillon, ran these wonderful carnivals, and we're going to be talking about that at later in the day. We've got a daughter of Charles Winter, the very alive secretary of the Geelong West Cycle Club in the 1920s. We've got Trevor Schneider here today, who's part of the Geelong Bike Plan in the 1970s. We've got people, Ken Dickey, who was a line painter with Melbourne Star in the 1950s. Does magnificent work with his line work. Still working. We've got members of the Geelong Touring Club, Greg Allerton and Lynn Kerr. The Geelong bike plan kicks off this wonderful bike plan which sets us all in the right direction. I'm going to ask Barbara Kilfoyle later today to talk to you about Bob Scott from Cobden. And before I introduce you to her, I'll tell you a bit more about her when I get to that point. One of the outcomes of today is that we've got another historian, another cycling historian in the district who's doing some work on the De Grande family. That's all I am, nothing more. But I would like, Harry, would you mind coming up and telling us perhaps, if you could, a few words about your cycling career, particularly about those early days. Harry Salmon from BIAC.
The BIAC Cycling Club started in 1936, but my father and his brothers did a bit of cycling in the early days in the BIAC and Colac district. I always remember a story he told once they were going to have a race from BIAC to Cressy and return, and actually one of Dad's cousins, who actually is Paul Salmon's great-grandfather, Paul Salmon of football fame, he was a BIAC, he was born and bred in BIAC, and he must have studied the weather and was going to be a tailwind home from Cressy. So they raced up to Cressy in the roaring north wind and a tailwind back. But equipment wasn't easy to get, there wouldn't be much about then, and it'd be back in the days of fixed wheel only. And he got busy with a bit of plate steel and made a bigger gear wheel than you could buy anywhere else. And he must have sat in with the bunch on the way up into the headwind, and once they turned round to come back, he wound the big gear up and away he went. There he was. There's one story I remember my dad talking about quite often. But,
well, I would firstly like to say that I was really grateful for Rod for taking all the memorabilia and that it could actually be put to some meaningful use. So thanks, Rod. My father was born in 1911 in Malden. From Malden he moved to Wallen, to a railway house, so it was 1.5 miles, 2 miles to school in those days, as a lot of us have probably heard from our parents, and that was walking. And then I think it would have been around 1918, the family moved to Cobden, where he finished his schooling. He left school, of course, age 14, as a person who qualified for his merit certificate, and went to work 19 k's out at Scotts Creek on a farm.
Just a bit, no, you're right.
Sorry,
That's all right.
here. So he was out there on the farm for the first time, earning some money in 1926. He saved his money, I would presume, and that meant he could then purchase a bike to ride out. As far as I know, they never had a horse. At age 16, he rode his first race in the Cobden Amateur Cycling Club, and he won. The next 2 years, I know he trained very hard on the hills all around the Otways, which probably links in with your training, because riding up and down those hills certainly gave him a start. He didn't need to go to the gym. He also was a person who never drank, sober, and very, never boasted about himself, but loved sport and was obviously quite good at it, because he also played football, tennis, cricket in the summer, but above all, he cycled practically every night. We have from his records, which have been kept meticulously, I think Rod would say that he didn't need a sports scientist to guide him. All the placings, the times, fastest time, what went wrong in the race. He always referred to himself as R.F. Scott.
Yeah.
It was quite distant. I think his first moment of glory, which probably shocked a lot of people, he went up to ride Ballarat, Geelong, Melbourne. He didn't get fastest time, it was given to Frank Hose, but he did leave the leaders at Elang, left his riding teammate further down the track. The roads weren't good, but he ended up riding into Footscray, 1.5 miles ahead of the bunch.
When you read the book, those of you who have purchased, you'll see these names. The name Harry Salmon is there in lights, and Bob Scott is certainly there in lights. The next person that I'm going to, and the last person that I'm going to ask to come up is Frank Conda. I met Frank quite some time ago, and this is a bit of a lead into the third volume, which is 1945. Now, what happens with Frank is that as a young lad before the war, he joins up with the Geelong West Club, or through the war, then goes off to war, and then he comes back, and he is part of a group with the Hamlets and others, and the Dillons, who come back and are involved with a lot of the stuff that went on at Geelong West with carnivals and Russell Mockridge and all that sort of thing. So I'm going to ask Frank if he wouldn't mind coming up and giving us a little bit of a lead into, don't give us all now, Frank, because I'll ask you next time, but give us a bit of a lead into your life. You start off with the Geelong West Club, you go to war, you come back. Let's have a little bit of a lead into that. Frank Conda.
Well, with my starting my cycling career, I was always down at the West Cycling Club when I was around about 10 years of age, probably a bit younger, down in Church Street, Lord's Dairy, where the bike races used to start and finish. And I would go over to the old club over there in the West Oval. And I also spent a bit of time at the old amateur club in Catherine Street, the old tin shed, where a lot of the young amateur bike riders started off. And then my mother and father used to go down and visit my grandparents on a Sunday afternoon for afternoon tea. And I'd give my father and mother time to get away from home, and I'd get my father's bike out of the shed, turn the handles down, and away I would go. And then I would try and judge the time that I'd have to get back home, put the bike, turn the handles up, put the bike back in the shed and close the doors so he didn't know anything about it. And then in 1936, when I started work at 14, I worked for about 6 months, and I had enough money to buy a new bike. So I bought a new racing bike from Jack Luttersworthy Cycles down in Pine Street, Geelong. And from that time on until I rode at the West Club, and then in 1940 I went on to the war, and I did not get back until 1946. And when I came back, I got the old bike out of the shed, started training for about 3 months, and then went back to racing at the club. And when I first went over to the club, I met a gentleman by the name of Charlie Chiletto, which was Tommy's father. And the first time that I did go into the club with my bike, he turned around and came up and said to me, he said, "Righto boy, sit there." And anyhow we sat alongside him, he said, "Now where's your bike?" And I said, "It's over there." Well, "Come on." And he said, "Sit on that bike." So he made me sit on the bike to make sure that I had the seat right, the handles right and so forth. From that time on, Charlie was a real tutor to us young bike riders. That was Tommy Chiletto's father. And then I rode quite a number of years there with the club, and I became on the committee, and there's a gentleman there by the name of Danny McGrath, which was an old-time rider.
Cycling Geelong has done it. We just started a cycling group of young cyclists and waited the 18 years. That's how you do it.
That's right.
Look, thank you very much for coming, and let's have a round of applause for Ron. I guess this form is more.
It does.
So congratulations.
You look so pretty as you were singing this song.